Hello and welcome to the BC Plan PLAR podcast. My name is Natalie DeVoe and I'm the co-host.
And my name is Andres Kapenko and I'm the co-host of the podcast with Natalie. And we are excited to introduce our guest for this episode. Jules is a father and artist and lives in Saanich, British Columbia. He serves on the BC Arts Council and his experience includes working as a leadership and governance consultant and in social services. Jules has completed a classroom and community support diploma through Douglas College and a master's in leadership through Royal Roads University. Jules' graduate thesis focused on the importance of young people having a voice in arts and culture organizations. He is now a co-executive director of Art Starts, a charity dedicated to providing young people an opportunity to participate in arts and culture. So Jules, how did you find out about PLAR and which thoughts did you have going into it?
Yeah, I was very fortunate in that I had a colleague who ran a PLAR project, Dr. Aaron Johannes, and Aaron invited me to join a potential cohort of PLAR students. And when he first invited me, it was many years ago, and the campus was at the New West campus for Douglas College. And it was quite difficult for me to get there by transit. It would have been 2 hours each way for me to go. And so the first time I heard about it, it sounded like an exciting program. But, even with Aaron offering to pick me up from the SkyTrain, I was like, that doesn't sound too attractive to spend my weekend. So my first actual interaction with PLAR was like, thanks, but no thanks. And where I was very fortunate, once the SkyTrain was built out to the Douglas College campus, he asked again, I think the next year, and said, that this PLAR thing is really cool, and it would be a match for a lot of the other things I was thinking about, just as far as education and testing my knowledge and kind of the theory of the field that I was in, which was disability services. I got in there and I certainly felt a bit nervous about going back to school and kind of coming back to challenge the knowledge I had. I think Douglas had a really good platform for that knowledge, which helps me really get past a lot of that nervousness and my thoughts on learning, and maybe some of my preconceived notions of what a learning as an adult was about. It was great, but I'm super grateful for Aaron Johannes and Lori Woods, who really made it, asked me to dig into my confidence, because it wasn't necessarily a matter of logistics at one point. It was a matter of like, did I feel like I could do this? And I had the confidence to go back to and re-examine my knowledge and assess my knowledge. And I'm so glad I did. So glad.
Oh, that's very interesting. So was it for a single course or multiple courses? How did that work?
I've actually done three, now that I think about it, 3 or 4 different types of PLAR or PLAR related projects. So the one with Douglas College was a diploma program, and I don't think they offer it at the same level they did when I did it. But when I did it, you could challenge a fair bit of the program. I can't remember the number, but it was over 50% of the credential. And so that was very attractive because, it was an opportunity to essentially credentialize myself. But that was not the only, reason. It was also, I was really interested in kind of sharpening my skills to advance in the field. And I was really excited about some of the stuff I'd learned, 10 years prior. And I was like, I don't know if I'm still operating with the best tools. So it was kind of like a great training practice. But I also did 2 adjacent PLAR projects in and around that time. The first was the Community Scholars Program, which operates out of SFU and I think TRU and maybe another campus. But it's not a credential program, but they do take into account any academic background you might have, and then connect you with a wonderful group of librarians like Heather DeForest out of SFU and a few others. and they connect you with practitioners in the field and sort of access to the academic literature. And it's a type of scholarship that is similar to PLAR in the sense where you might look at what do you know, and then what would you want to know, and what might a community of practice look at that. And I just loved that. That was so great. I'm still, involved tangentially in that project, but I find it, it's wonderful to be in that. And the third piece was with Royal Roads. They have a pathway to their master's program, to a certain master's degrees, where you can use a process very similar to the prior learning assessment, where you can challenge essentially the entry by saying you've demonstrated a similar amount of knowledge in the field, and demonstrate it with some, maybe academic writing you've done and some demonstrations of your work. And what I did through the PLAR program in Douglas College was I took courses on leadership, and I just loved the leadership literature. And it was actually taking that SkyTrain home with an Indigenous elder who told me about if you liked PLAR here, you might like the PLAR at Royal Roads. And I'm so glad I got that SkyTrain ride, which I was so nervous about spending that time on it. Actually ended up being one of the journeys that I really quite enjoy.
I'm going to ask two clarifying questions. The Royal Roads, were you challenging prerequisites? Were you using PLAR processes to get into the master's program?
Yeah, their pathway is, you have to forgive me what it's called. But it is essentially to go into the master's program without a bachelor's.
And they're taking into consideration, as you said, like academic writing that you might have done, work experience, etc.
Exactly. And I believe it was like 10 years of progressive management experience, being able to write it at a certain academic level, being able to demonstrate a certain amount of writing and confidence which through the PLAR process, I feel I was ready for in that.
And when you used PLAR in the diploma at Douglas College, how long, do you happen to remember roughly how long it took from the application, the beginning of the process, to when 50% or however much the percentage was that you got in the end when all of those courses were recognized? Do you remember how long you worked on that with them?
It was one of those things where I was trying to do it in the most efficient way possible because of the amount of time it took to get out there. And I remember there was some limitations with, you could only challenge a certain amount in a day, right? Like you could only do a certain amount of tests per day. And also you get exhausted by doing it. But I think the whole thing was a 2-year diploma program. And roughly the whole thing took me 2 years. But it wasn't like I had to go full time or be present over the first 2 years. You know what I mean? The first year was just the testing, which was mostly weekends and was pretty casual and fairly doable. And then when it came to completing the final amount, which I think was for me, I want to say it was like I got through 60 or maybe even 70%. Then each piece, it took more time, but it did seem fairly reasonable to me. And I was actually quite excited when I didn't pass a course, because I was like, oh, I don't have the full, I don't actually know this stuff,
Yeah, there's something for me to learn. There's something more for me to learn in that area, right?
So by the time I got to it, I was actually really grateful for it. I did take a little reduced time at work. I think I went from like 5 days down to 3 or 4. And that was, my employer was, very supportive of that. But the last maybe 6 months of it were a little more intense than the first 18 months, right?
Speaking about the actual process of assessment of your prior learning at Douglas College, could you tell us how was your prior learning assessed? Was it a portfolio or you had to write some tests?
Mm. You know which one I remember that was just like a lot of fun and kind of a good test was I did do the portfolio, I did do the written tests, but I also had to demonstrate because I was in the disability sector, some competency with the mechanics of say lifting someone and transferring them from a bed to another bed or to a bed to a wheelchair. And
So it was like a skills demonstration, perhaps.
yeah, it was a skills demonstration. And you didn't get any chance to rehearse or I guess practice. It was sort of like either you know this and and you'll be able to demonstrate, or you'll need to take the course. And I found it really, quite fortunately, I think I had taken maybe the year before a transfer of function. It's not quite a course, but like you worked with a nurse in doing those exact steps. So it was really good for me because I was getting to a year away from that, and I was like, am I doing this right? Because I was actually training staff on how to do some of this work. I really wanted to make sure my skills were sharp on it, as not to cause an injury with it. So that was cool. I ended up passing that one, and that was great. But so I did some skills demonstration, and then with the sort of written or theory test, some of it was I found pretty, I felt I could respond to it pretty well. But as I was kind of mentioning, sometimes there'd be a theory where I thought there was just one theory on how, I think one of the things that really struck me was what's called person-centered planning. I thought really only one or two people had done person-centered planning scholarship, and that was kind of it. And I was so impressed to find, there's dozens of formats of doing it, and there's like things I had never heard about coming out of different parts of the world. And I was just, so when I failed that one, or I didn't know certain parts of it, I was like, that's cool. Like that's so I
You
think
have such a great attitude. That's amazing.
yeah.
I love to hear that. It's like you're excited. Oh, I failed because there's more going on. I want to know all of the different people working on this area.
Yeah, it was cool. So
Oh, that's so interesting.
yeah. If you got really close, like if you were 69 out of 70%, I do remember you could challenge with like, okay, you could do one essay rather than retake the entire course. And so that seemed like a reasonable trade-off, right? If I was pretty close, 67% or something, right? But
yeah, it's interesting for us to hear details like that because I work with PLAR pretty much every day. And so those details really matter to us. Like, does a person get to retest? And under what conditions can they retest, and how many times, and how long do they need to wait? Like those things, they do matter. So it's interesting to hear that if you got 67 or 69, then it sounds like you would retest, but not the entire test. You would only do a section of it. Is that right?
yeah, and at that time, I think they were pretty new to PLAR, or at least new to a reconstruction of it. And one of the concerns they had were some of the courses were identical to what the class would have taken, and there would be questions on there that were something to the effect of like, "How is on class number 3? How did you respond to question A, B, C, or D?" Like it's a question that didn't have any context, so I couldn't really answer it because it wasn't a generic enough question. So it created some level of like, well, we want to test you identically to your peers, but in a way that's not fair. I think that there must have been some way they resolved it. There weren't too many of those tests, but I think when that came up, I remember the person overseeing it was able to sort of provide an alternative practice for that.
Yeah, adapt it to the PLAR context without really changing the level of difficulty or what's being assessed.
Yeah, exactly.
When you were preparing for these different assessments that you did, to what degree did they give you information about the assessment ahead of time? Like what supports and resources did you receive? Did you find useful or not? For example, with the skills demonstration, it's clear that you actually weren't given information in advance, right? It sounds like it was
Nothing.
sort of, yeah, right, sprung on you. But maybe some of the other ones you were given some supports or resources. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, there were some that were, pretty, I guess just, you had to respond quickly, but there were some where, you could look up that you were going to take this course and you could Google a syllabus for it and you could kind of see what was there. On the other hand, I don't know if it was just me, but I found, too much of that took maybe a little bit of the excitement out of it for me, or I found I got to a point where I couldn't bother
Right.
to look it all up all the time because I was just freaking out that I wouldn't know what the knowledge was. And I think the best support I got was from Lori and Aaron being like, it doesn't, if you fail one, that's an opportunity to take that course, right? And maybe at some point just kind of letting go and going into it knowing that sure I might have to prove my credential, but in order to get the credential, it actually wasn't, it was more about the like learning to enjoy the learning, which I was fortunate I did the community scholars program beforehand, which was about, you don't know everything, so you need to be in a community of practice with other professionals and other scholars to help you learn. So I'd been primed for that a little bit, and I think fortunately had support from some of those leaders to just don't think about it as like a binary of failure and passing, but as like part of your general knowledge exploration. Yeah. So I was quite fortunate that I had that support. I did find it was doable, like the knowledge to find it and like get, a loose amount of preparation was probably good. But I found if I was doing more than a couple of hours of like prepping for a test, that was probably a sign that I needed more information than it was. And there's some sort of like, knowledge questions that I found it was better to have the qualitative answers than the multiple choice answers, because I might not have known the particular multiple choice answer, but had I had the opportunity to write a short, like, 100-word response, I felt I could really respond to it, maybe even a bit, maybe even more than what was in sometimes the textbook. So just because I'd been in the field working on that exact problem for like the last 10 years that, and I had mentioned earlier, like sometimes there was a theory that I was more familiar with the ones we use locally than what this particular teacher was teaching, but I still wanted to learn. And I think being able to demonstrate it verbally or in a written format I found a better process, or at least seemed to make more sense with the rigor of it all, right? To me.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was a better opportunity for you to demonstrate your knowledge that you obtained through the Community Scholars Program, the community of practice, and just learning, and then the experiences that you were having on the job to be able to present that in a short answer is a much better opportunity than through multiple choice. They may not be asking questions that specifically touch on that wide range of areas that you'd studied.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
Did PLAR benefit you on the personal side? And did you notice any benefits it might have brought to you in the work life?
Oh, absolutely. I think the part about it that was really helpful was from a personal level, there's the the kind of transformation through knowledge. And I think of there's a scholar out there who did Research as Ceremony is the name of his book, and it's called it's by Sean, I think it's Dr. Sean Wilson, I believe the name. I might have to check that, but Wilson's sort of take is if you're doing research and you're doing knowledge, it should change you a little bit. And I certainly felt that in my practice, that it was so humbling to go back and be like, oh, I thought I really understood this practice, but there's another frame of it, or maybe learning about the origins of a particular framework I was using was really quite helpful to get away from some of the dogmatic practices I might have unintentionally joined in on. And then, I think in my professional practice, one thing that was quite shocking was just, and you hear about this all the time, is like a lot of us are just winging it all the time, and no matter what job we're doing, because we just don't have that time to sit back and look at the scholarship. We don't have that time to get comfortable with kind of a critical look or an iterative look, I guess, on what our knowledge is. So those three different education systems I went through, the Royal Roads, the Douglas, and the community scholars, all taught me different variations on, where is my knowledge? How is it challenged by a group of peers, hopefully in a loving and kind of supportive way, not to challenge your knowledge to make you feel, lesser, but to challenge your knowledge to help you kind of construct what could be possible. And that was such a big shift, because I'd gone into it so terrified that not having the knowledge was, maybe like some form that you weren't smart enough or not valuable enough. And really it's made me so kind of, I try to help others when they're learning, feel good about, you don't have to know all the answers. You can be learning, you can be in development. And that might actually be a better place to be than assuming you know everything, because that can be a big problem, right?
I was wondering about that, actually. I was wondering, because you've talked a bit about how you may have lacked some confidence at first to engage with the PLAR process, and then you got more confident as you went along. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I sort of understood. And I wondered if you've communicated that to other people.
Mm-hmm. I'm always trying to get everybody to go back to school, like the way that I did. And I know that because I can sympathize. I think maybe I struggled in high school a bit, and then I maybe bought in a little bit to that like anti-academic kind of position that like academia is not perfect, and who are they to lord
Yeah,
knowledge.
the elitists.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think that I certainly, I having struggled in school a bit, and I certainly kind of look back on having a few teachers that probably said some stuff that were inappropriate for a teacher to say. Now that I'm an adult, that I go, that was actually kind of a cruel thing to say. I had a teacher, actually, a high school teacher, promised me I'd never go to university because I wasn't smart enough. And when I think back on what a weird thing for a teacher to do in a private kind of like take you aside and say, I'm going to let you pass this course, but only if you promise you'll never go to university. What a weird thing to do. Those moments kind of stuck with me in a way that obviously it affected some of my internal belief systems on if I even belonged at school. But I actually really liked learning, so it was an odd thing to sort of be not until there's something like PLAR where, and I think Aaron and Lori picked up on it, that I was for fun picking up like disability theory books and reading on my own time and reading some of this stuff. They're like, why don't you come in and take some classes, right? So it did. I'm so grateful for their perseverance in that, and the same with the Royal Roads staff, where I really didn't feel like I even belonged there at some point, and they were quite gracious to be like, you're actually an exceptional student, and I've written a thesis and done research, and they're all imploring me to get my doctorate. So that's quite a shock, kind of coming from a place where I had such a low confidence in my educational skills, that it's nice to sort of to revisit that you can approach knowledge as an iterative process, and you might actually be in a better place by kind of recognizing you don't know everything, or demonstrating your lack of knowledge might actually be a good thing. Yeah, so that's a bit from there. So yeah.
This is so inspiring.
Oh, that's great.
Jules, is there anything you'd like to share to those considering PLAR? And for our listeners, how can someone get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, you can get in touch with me. My name is Jules André-Brown, and probably the easiest way to get in touch with me is just to Google search. I'm on LinkedIn, and that's an easy way to get a hold of me. But I'm also the co-director of at Art Starts in Schools, which is a nonprofit organization in the Lower Mainland, and we do arts engagement across BC, and of course I have an email there, which is jules@artstarts.com. So I'm always more than happy to connect there. And my website, julesandrebrown.com, is with my governance practice. I've been doing governance consulting, and so that's another easy place to get in touch with me. And there was another part of the question, which I forgot. What was the other part of the question there?
Any final comments? Anything you'd like to share, especially with those considering PLAR?
Yeah, I think, Lori said to me that she said something to the effect of like, no amount of closets gets cleaned, or skeletons in your closets get cleaned, than when going back to school. You're never going to get a cleaner closet than when you're applying for school. And I think what she meant by that was something to the effect of, you will find all the reasons to procrastinate and, clean up or do other activities, rather than go back and get back into the swing of school. And, there's a lot of concerns that you might have. Like, I was worried I'd be the oldest person in the room, and that actually wasn't true, and was actually, even if I was, who cares, but at the time it seemed, the thought of kind of going back to school and, forgetting my pencil case or something, like all the things that were there were so insignificant into what I gained. And I made some good friends along the way, which is great. So, that was worth it. It's a process where, I'm not afraid of it anymore, but it did take I don't think I could have gotten over it without doing it, if that makes sense. Right. So I'm now kind of looking for those kind of knowledge challenges, or I'm excited for that kind of stuff. So I think to anyone who's looking for it, it's a great way to just kind of get started and maybe build some confidence in your your ability to do knowledge, or like transmit knowledge, which is going to be more and more an important part of not just your professional life, but your cultural life, is to reckon with all the information and misinformation and disinformation out there. And there's just some really great opportunities that come from all the different formats of taking your knowledge and sort of reapplying it in a different context. And I think if you can find a graceful mentor, like how I had some, that will do you so much, and hopefully you can find people out there who are as kind as they were to me. Lori really went to bat for me in a lot of things, and really wanted to help me on my pathway, and help me get over a lot of the anxiety of the registrar and all that stuff. And
right,
it just makes such a difference to now when I guess a piece that I'm so grateful for is now when I'm in other, if I'm in the lineup for the airport or something, I kind of try to approach that with as much love and sort of respect as I have for the registrars, which I needed to kind of learn how those people are doing an important job. and they need things at certain times, so if you approach it as like, here's a way to kind of help you find how to, Aaron said something like, you just need to learn how to jump through this hoop, and it's not more complicated than that. It's just the practice of jumping through a hoop. You don't have to, once you do it, then it's a good skill to have. And I'm so glad for that piece that I think it's made so many other interactions in my life very, very warm and kind. So I hope that other people find something similar to that. I'm just such an advocate for it. So if you have any questions, I always have time to talk with someone about PLAR. So do feel free to get at me, Jules@André-Brown.com.
Jules, on behalf of BC Prior Learning Action Network, we'd like to cordially thank you for this opportunity to learn about your PLAR experience and especially how it affected you. Thank you very much, Jules.
Thank you both. This has been great. I'm so happy for all the work you're doing.
I want to say thank you, Jules, as well. This was really a pleasure, and I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to chat with you briefly today.
Great. Well, thank you, and looking forward to all the podcasts you all put out, and thanks for having me.